Well, Siegfried, thank you so much for giving your time. It's an amazing opportunity for me to introduce you again to Australia. Well, I've learned your methodology 7 years ago, and to speak directly with the person who invented the methodology, it's amazing. And also to report to you that in 7 years, we see amazing results with infra-low frequencies, basically taking over our clinic. We're opening now the Australian Centre for Autism and Neurodevelopment. It's already has a lot of clients. It would be good for you to update people in Australia about infra-low frequency. Not many people know about infra-low frequency training and what the EEG info does in these days.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us about your latest development.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You know, we started coming to Australia in the mid-90s, or I don't know, maybe even before then. And we were there about 4 or 5 times. Got a number of people started with the earlier generation of training. Of course, it's very effective, and people stuck with it. One can be proud of that also. But we are looking forward to going back and talking about our new developments. It turns out that these new developments really will shape the field going forward as they begin to be appreciated in the field at large. So it is indeed time to go back. The other thing is I want to share the glory here a little bit with the fact of the matter is this is a team effort. And the developments, the technical developments, of course, largely come out of the clinical work, which is what Sue is conducting. Then we're also dependent on the wonderful instrumentation developments that go along with that to make it all technically possible, which is by Bernard Wandernoot out of Switzerland. And so it's really a team effort with a good many parties involved. Now, the nice thing is that with this new development of infra-low frequency training, we're opening doors to working with early developmental issues. Regardless of where they appear, you know, they can basically determine the rest of a person's life, and so we often see this among adults, right? But we see the residue of what started out as early developmental trauma. And these are, of course, the clinical challenges wherever they show up, whether they show up in a medical practice or whether they show up with a psychiatrist or psychologist or whoever, because these people just end up with a raft of problems, and they're not easy to pin down. But now we know they're traceable to these adverse early childhood events. And now the autism spectrum is really part of that. It's part of this. What I'm talking about here is those early developmental miscues. The nice thing about the infra-low training is that we've really moved beyond the standard model of neurofeedback. We're really training the brain directly in a way that really puts the brain in charge. Right? Whereas the old neurofeedback, we were in charge. We said, okay, this is what's good for you. We're going to do this and that and the other. And maybe we were right and maybe we weren't. Limited state of knowledge. But now we're basically saying, okay, here's the information, dear brain, deal with it. You know, and then we see what happens in this interaction between the brain and its own EEG. And then we basically guide the process, but we don't control the process, given what we know. And the nice thing is now, by putting the brain in charge, it completely unburdens the person. The person has no role to play. They just have to bring their body, sit there and watch the signal, and the brain does its thing. So there's no burden on those people, right? And so that means we can do it with infants. Because even the infant brain is trying to come to terms with itself, with its environment and whatever. It's fully engaged. Which is kind of amazing when you think about it. You know, we see the limited competence, motor competence of an infant, which says something about the limited maturity of the motor system, but not of the brain per se. Because the brain is managing all kinds of things in the infant and doing it very exquisitely well. And when we show the brain its own activity, the brain's right there. It says, okay, you know, I get it. But we're looking at this infant, and it's hard for us to be looking at that infant and yet realizing the incredible competence of that infant brain. And so that competence is there, and we take advantage of it. And so the infant is looking at the video, has no idea what's going on, but meanwhile the brain is processing the signal, and the brain is recognizing itself as, wait a minute, this is my dance, I'm interested in my dance, right? And it goes from there. And so, we've had the electrodes on a 3-week-old infant. Now, what that means for the autism spectrum is that the very first time that a mom becomes aware something is not right with my child, right? We're already in a position to help. Now that's still a big leap, because the first thing the mom is going to do is go to her pediatrician. And the pediatrician is, of course, rightly going to be reluctant to diagnose and reluctant to, so they're going to be very cautious about upsetting the apple cart and worrying the mom needlessly. And the usual tendency will be to project that all will be well, And also, the pediatrician has very little means to intervene in these issues. Basically, the mom is sent home to watch and wait. Strategy is watching and waiting, because there are not many action items in these cases. But now we have an action item, and it's neurofeedback. The worst that can happen is a waste of time and money. The best that can happen is a resolution of the problem. I mean, this is not a hard choice. The earlier we intervene, the better the prospects, right? So this is the new era, and it has particular relevance to the autism spectrum. In research, we're now talking about early detection, early discrimination, early identification of the problem, and so forth. The problem is manifest. When you see odd behaviors in the child, we know what the spectrum of behaviors are. You start there. You already have the evidence that the child is not on a proper developmental path, and whatever else may need to be done, certainly neurofeedback should be in the mix. And now we're thinking it actually should be almost the first thing to do, because it's the quickest to respond. If you do things like biomedical methods, anything like that, with an autistic child, that typically is time-consuming. It takes time for things to show up, and then it takes patience on everybody's part, that kind of thing. So it's a burden on the family. With neurofeedback, we have a chance to lighten the burden on that family very quickly, right? And so you do that, doesn't solve all the problem, and hopefully the parent will now then decide, okay, problem is solved, because even if it looks to be solved, if there are biomedical issues and so forth, in context of that autism case, those should be pursued as well. We really want to get at this problem in a multidimensional way, but we've certainly moved, because of the strengthening of our technique over the years, we've certainly moved to being fairly confident that neurofeedback ought to be one of the first things that the families of autistic children should try. And it'll just help the whole family. So this is what you have a chance to implement there, and yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Siegfried, for good insights for us and for Australian parents and customers and practitioners. And we're looking forward to have proper training in Australia on a regular basis, hopefully. And I think the most important thing about this is that it gives hope to our customers, to our clients, and their parents. And hope.
Yep.
Thank you very much.